Wealth, Atherstone said, rubbing his hands. Damn it, man. I'm telling you, we're going to be rich. Insanely rich. The massive ship, slowly rotating on the view screens, was astonishing. 2 miles in diameter, the gigantic disk looked like a monstrous seed dropped in time immemorial by an ancient titan in a remote corner of the galaxy. In a way, it was. The Ktar civilization that had built the ship had disappeared over 1,000,000 years ago, burned out in a monstrous war with another powerful race, the Mercurians. Of course, neither the Ktar nor the Mercurians called themselves that. Not much was known about them now. 1,000,000 years is a very long time for the civilization to survive. Random strange artifacts, remnants of majestic ruins on desert planets, and scraps of ancient legends were all that Galcon archaeologists had to work with. The government won't let us pocket the whole ship, Nissen said. The government won't let us pocket the whole ship, Nissen said. It's a one-in-a-lifetime discovery. No one has ever found an entire Ktar ship before, only scattered ruins and artifacts. The usual rules for claiming antiquities and shipwrecks won't work here. Atherstone waved his partner off. Spare me that crap, will you? We'll get a huge bonus anyway. Remember how it was with the crew of Chong-Sun and Ulche 19? All they found was a mangled Ktar escape pod. They got a few million credits for each crew member, so Ulche 19 was even able to buy back all of his Cocoon brothers before the killing season started. And don't forget the glory. Interviews, press conferences, that sort of thing. Man, all the media of the Galactic Confederation would nourish and babysit us. He typed a command on the terminal, turned up the holoscreen of the primary scanner, and began manipulating the customization icons. Let's find a way into this thing, he said. When the time comes, we'll get that juicy bonus. But no one's stopping us from looking around before we return to the show of our lives. Inside, the Ktar ship was even more impressive than it looked from afar. The Mercurians, enemies of the Ktar, were a non-biological civilization, but it was impossible to determine now whether they were a race of rebellious machines of the Ktar themselves, or whether they had evolved independently before crossing paths with the Ktar. The Ktar, however, were a total mystery. The information that had survived from ancient times was contradictory, painting the Ktar as humanoids, inhabitants of the water worlds, or insectoids, or ascribing to them forms that had no analogues among the hundreds of races of Galcon. Even the name Ktar was given to them by another civilization that had disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. Looking at the strange outlines of the corridors and rooms of the ship, Nissen was ready to agree with the most exotic hypothesis. The ship looked as if it had not been built, but grown like a houseplant. And yet the materials of which it was composed were strong enough to carry it through the chromosphere of a star, to withstand monstrous interstellar battles, or, for that matter, to be preserved for 1,000,000 years. Atherstone kicked with his spacesuit shoe at the 80-root-like protrusion on the floor of what they called, for a lack of better term, a hangar. In fact, it was just a vast, cubic-shaped compartment, a good few 100 feet long, with no craft in it. To be more precise, there was nothing in it at all, except for a thin layer of grey dust. All right, I understand that they took everything of value when they left the ship, Atherstone said irritably. But it can't be that even some drunken mechanic didn't drop a wrench or something. His voice in the com's earpiece rang with righteous indignation. Nissen shrugged. Maybe he did, he said. It's been 1,000,000 years, Ed. 1,000,000. Do you think our wrenches will last at least 100,000? Atherstone only cursed. They'd been wandering around the Ktar ship for 3 hours and found absolutely nothing. Just a maze of corridors and rooms in strange alien shapes that looked like the insides of a giant mummified animal. Perhaps some of Galcon's non-humanoid races would have seen something familiar in it, but Nissen felt completely out of place and was sure that depths pierced even through his partner's armor of greed. "We'd better go back for the tools," Atherstone said suddenly. "Let's take a mining laser and cut a piece off. At least we'll get some dough." Nissen sighed. He'd been expecting something like this. "Ed, if the authorities find, and they will, that we've dismantled something without their admission, they'll just throw us in jail. How much will you get for tar metal on the black market? 100,000 creds? Couple maybe, as opposed to several million. Come on, buddy, it's not worth it. Just think about it." For a while, the beam of Atherstone's helmet lantern slid across the floor and walls of the ship, lingering on each bizarre protrusion. Nissen was silent. He knew his friend. Atherstone was saying goodbye to his urge to snatch an extra penny. "All right," he said finally, and Nissen caught a note of resigned annoyance in his voice. "We'd better get home before some other hobo stumbles across this ancient trove." "It's 3 hyperjumps to the nearest patrol base," Nissen said, sitting in the pilot's seat and leaning over the control panel. "The hypercoms may be intercepted, so it's best to hand the report directly to the commander. By the way, the base is run by Garmenchis, and that's good. They can't lie and cheat. I'd thought twice with the humans." His nose crinkled and he sneezed loudly. "Damn! The ventilation's acting up again," he said. "As soon as we jump, we'll have to get to work on the filters. You hear that, Ed?" Instead of an answer, there was a loud sneeze and cough from behind him. Nissen sighed and stood up. "What's the matter with you again?" he began, and stopped short, barely managing to bounce out of the way. The beam of the laser pistol passed within an inch of his head and left a melted hole in the ceiling paneling. Atherstone, with a completely gray face and crazily bulging eyes, stared at the pistol he was gripping with both hands. "Damn it, Nis! I swear it wasn't me! It was like something forced me! Oh God, Nis! No!" He quickly raised his gun, put it to his head, and fired. Nissen watched in horror as Atherstone fell to the floor. His head was buzzing, his mouth had a strange taste, and circles swam before his eyes. But he saw a puff of grey dust rise from where Atherstone had fallen. Nissen wanted to rush to his friend, but his body refused to obey. Like a virtual movie spectator, Nissen watched with detachment as his own body returned to the console and set the ship's jump coordinates to a completely unfamiliar point in space. He couldn't move a finger. Something had taken complete control of his body, disregarding the will of his former master, who had become a passive observer. As if in a dream, he noted that the terminal also needed proper cleaning. The same grey dust was lying on it in a thin layer. The dust! Suddenly, Nissen realized everything. The puzzle came together into a coherent picture of what was happening. Now, It was clear to him what a mistake all the Ktar explorers had been making, wondering why their artifacts and ruins seemed to have been created for completely different races, and why there was no trace of an authentic Ktar language. The Ktar simply didn't need it, just as, strictly speaking, they didn't need the ships and cities. They could simply use what their slaves created. Such a small mistake. Neeson and Atterston didn't sanitize the spacesuits upon their return. What could survive in a million-year-old ship? Only what the ship was built to preserve. Great dust. The Ktar outsmarted everyone. Pretty clever for a virus.